Okay, hi everyone, and welcome. I'm Shailene, a librarian in the Fiction and Humanities Department here at the library. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. And before we begin today's event, I just want to mention that we have lots of great poetry happenings at the Pratt Library. For example, we have a monthly poetry discussion group that happens virtually, and next Saturday we are discussing the poet Franny Choi. We have a creative writing nature walk coming up on Saturday, May 31st, and we will soon be welcoming a writer in residence specializing in poetry. So I'm expecting some fantastic poetry programming associated with that person. If you sign up to be on our poetry events email list, which you can do in the back of the room, you will get reminders about poetry events. And if you're watching us online, you can ask to be added to our poetry event email list by emailing poetry@prattlibrary.org. So today's event is really special. We are thrilled to celebrate Jalen Eutsey's new chapbook, Bubblegum Stadium, with him, and also to feature, yay! We're also really happy to feature Dora Malech reading primarily from her book Flourish. Yay! Dora is going to read first, so I'm going to introduce her to you. Dora Malech's fourth book of poetry, Flourish, was published in 2020, and her fifth book of poetry, Trying Times Trying, is forthcoming in fall 2025. Her poems have appeared in publications that include The New Yorker and Best American Poetry. She is editor-in-chief of the Hopkins Review and a professor in the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University. Flourish begins with a poem called Party Games about a blindfolded child whacking joyfully at a piñata. Its gorgeous weave of sounds draws us into a spell and then into a meditation on the danger of that spell. The realization of, quote, how good it feels to play at this, violence and darkness, the beast that harbors something sweet. Wary of how easily human desire can lead to violence, the book works to discover a more generous mode of celebration. From the donkey piñata, we turn towards real wild things, a raccoon that washes his hands of us, a field reveling in its unraveling, a scorpion that raises his claw as if to say he wants this much. Mimicking these creatures, the poems become acts of gratitude for a transient world, such as a bed of flowers, clematis, sweet pea, sweet alyssum, sweet asylum, adornments, adamant, heaven sent. Naming reality without mangling it may be impossible. Saying a thing's still slippery as the stones in the stream bed of Roland Run, one poem reminds us. But perhaps language can jolt us into seeing its distance from the world. Deliciously dense sound patterns like sweet alyssum, sweet asylum, surprise us in this way. In For Eliza, spoken to a friend recovering from tragedy, the poet admires a mobile. Quote, long after your daughters look through its slow turning, the shadows it throws still make sense of a relationship with light. Flourish also makes sense of a relationship to light by showing us shadows. It describes the joy we cannot keep. Poet Rick Barrett writes, dazzled and mournful, often at the same time, Malech's poems keep asking, you, will you attend? And in their intensities, imaginative, emotional, ethical, these poems keep saying yes. Please help me to welcome Dora Malech.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move this. What do you What do you think? Will this work? That's going to work? Okay. Um, I will thank you again. Thank you so much, Shailene. That was such a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate that. And at first, I started to get nervous that you were psychically quoting from the poems that I want to read, but then I think maybe that's a good thing, the little preview, and now I'll read. I wanted to say how happy I am to be reading with Jalen Eutsey, who is somebody who I worked with when he was a student, at Johns Hopkins University in the writing seminars there, where he got his MFA. And I got the chance to work with him closely through that, through Writers in Baltimore Schools, and then just through being in Baltimore. And so he really went from being, I would say, a student to a friend to family, and very much throughout that whole process has been just a poet that I admire so much. And I'm happy for everybody's success and everybody's first, publication between two covers. But let's be honest, I'm most happy for his. I'm just like thrilled. So I'm going to read some poems from Flourish. I thought I might read like a new poem or two, but yes, let's see. I'll start with the first poem in the book, which is the first one that Shailene quoted. And thank you all for being here. Thank you to Shailene. Thank you to Cleve as well. And to Snug Books for selling books. It starts with a quote from Andrew Joran, "Might night right sight." The first thing she did after we blindfolded her and turned her in circles by her shoulders was lunge, for where she thought her target hung, and hit tree trunk instead. With one strike against it, split the stick in half to jagged dagger in her fists. The donkey gently swayed within reach, barely grazed and staring straight ahead with the conviction inherent to its kind at the horizon that a gaze implies. Paper mane fluttering in the breeze of a near miss, belly ballasted with melting chocolate kisses, drawn grin belying its thingness, rictus of ritual and craft. She's grinning too and laughing, regaining her balance, planting her feet in a samurai stance. She brandishes her splinter. There's no harm in letting her take another turn without turning her around again. We think we know how this ends, how good it feels to play at this. Violence and darkness, the beast that harbors something sweet. Lake Roland Park, 2016. And this kind of tells its story, but for those of you, which I think is many or most, who live here in Baltimore, this is right around 2016 was right after the renaming of what we now know as Lake Roland Park. Lake Roland Park, 2016. Lilacs, mown grass, and the scent of my own soap rising from the back of my neck in the heat. The train downtown sighs by beyond the trees. A minute later, the train into the county looks the other way. Fancy all these flowers opening to mouth their truest names. In a notebook from last spring, I don't want Robert E. Lee Park to be this pretty. It's spring again now, Earth's orchestra pit swelling into green strains, vernal reprise. In between nominal reprieve, in the fall, executives announced the park's new name, which had long been the name of the reservoir itself actually, at the groundbreaking for a new nature center. Ceremonial photo opportunity with hard hats, shovels, smiles. Replaced. I visited the park for the first time last May, the month after what the city calls, alternately, the riots, the unrest, the uprising. The bill to rename was introduced last summer, later, following the Charleston shooting. I can't hear it, but there's music all around me, literally. Everyone walking and jogging past wears headphones, earbuds. Imagine hooks and bass lines, melodies unheard except for self-selecting audiences of one by one. Saying a things still slippery as the stones in the stream bed of Roland Run. To say that we are listening is not to say that these are hearings, though there are hearings. This is one of those poems that you listen to and think, is she talking about peeing? And the answer is, yeah, talking about peeing. America, that feeling when. America, that feeling when, full of suicide coke, each gush released in turn into one white plastic chalice's open mouth aimed wide at heaven's fluorescent fixtures flickers to receive the syrup sacrament, wild for to hold its aspartame. The super in superfluous gulp runneth over in alchemical union, each perfect bubble bursting to be ascendant in the straw that stiff and red as a child's drawing of her father's hardened artery. You pull off to the side of a back road beyond a town where flags wave two different flavors of anger, flapping simulacra of the stars above. Here in the headlight, stripes of light, bars of light, as what's in wants out and can't wait any longer for the next gas station convenience store. You unzip and squat. To darken gravel dust to ink blot test over which you bend closer, toward a glint that turns out to be your stream shining a spent shell casing. Flight map. And some of you here, and maybe it's just Danielle, have spent time in Iowa, as I have. But this was written when I was teaching one summer for a program called Between the Lines, which brought students, high school students from Russia and from the Middle East together with American high school students to study writing. The International Writing Program is one of many programs that the current administration cut funding for in a really massive way, and Between the Lines was one of the programs that was cut. Flight map. After Mohammed El-Kurd, flight map. After Mohammed El-Kurd, Lily Sickles et al. And those were two of the students in the program where I borrow some of their thinking, so wanted to credit them accordingly. It's just an in-class exercise. I ask each student to share a line so we can collaborate, weave disparate histories together. It's just for fun, I say, a phrase that probably sounds less than convincing coming from the teacher, but no one protests. Heads bowed, they put their pens to paper. Mohammed writes of a refugeed God. I ask if he means simply refugee or maybe exiled, and he says no, he knows what he means is refugeed. Lily writes her hair into the nests of birds on two continents. Genetics twists her locks to echoes of the double helixes that make a home of each of us. My mind flits to the pair of doves I saw startled from what they'd built in the eaves, how verbs aver agency, and how one might find that nest and say it had been abandoned. We're moving on, I say. I have a lesson prepared on the first person plural. I hit the arrow on the PowerPoint. Soon our session will adjourn and we'll board our respective flights back to Newark or to Moscow or Jerusalem. Doves live on every continent except the frozen poles. Here's where I try to convince you that we'll always have each other's words, the holy nest in what's said honestly. I'll read this one. It's called Rats. When I first moved to Baltimore, I saw the little rat logo all over the place. And I said, what's the deal with the rat logo? And the person I asked said to me, we've got rats. Okay, fair, fair. Rats. Sudden underfoot, this one cries back, echo of my outsized cartoon shriek. In snow, I catch its passing by the tail's naked drag, line drawn through the fallen flakes between footprints, making not map but mockery of any designs on following. In summer, certain nights fall like ancient rites as the rats appear en masse, frenzied to orgy or worship. My planted patch bared down to a brown square by morning, I have heard mint, and I have heard smoke bombs and a shovel and a shop vac in reverse, steel wool and ground glass mixed into concrete, snap traps, glue traps, poison pellets, ammonia-soaked rags, cat piss, a 22, antifreeze, and something called a zapper, which takes 4D batteries. In the stark fluorescent light of labs, they're how we've come to know what's actually inside of us, our pathways and our processes. So why not in the "this is not a test," the dim and dirty actual of the world as well? Loathing them's the only issue upon which our city's residents can all agree. The rat, that gnawer in the dark, whose open-rooted incisors grow endlessly beveled, bedeviled, reviled, for whom satiety is never finished work, whose teeth without relief would grow into a perfect spiral, from whom we recoil without acknowledging our own geometries of need and claim anathema slips through our chain-link symmetries. Cases our foundations, traces where our walls meet with the rub of its body's grease, and each night reveals itself in us as too close to the furthest thing from what we think we want our want to be. And I will read one more poem from this book, and then one new poem. And this is a very short one. Gratitude. Gratitude that one expends, expands. Glass less full than effervescent. Shook spray making rainbows. Rainbows making certain skies promise. Promise making and remaking itself imperfectly each day as a note coaxed from the glass's lip. Sip or spill to shift the pitch and sing out what is missing. And I am going to read, let me just pull this out. I have a new book coming out in the fall, and thank you. And I might read one poem from that to end, but I think for now, I'm going to read a poem that is newer than that. There's always like a lag time on these things. And so when Flourish came out, I was like, man, I've already read the poems from this like before they were in the book. So I'm going to read you something that by the time it's ever out in the world, you'll have absolutely forgotten ever hearing it. And so there's some lines in this that are quoted from A Child's Garden of Verse, which is sort of one of those like old, you know, kids rhyming books of verse. And so when something sounds weird, it's probably from there. And I wrote a whole bunch of poems that are going to be in the book that's coming out in the fall that are for my daughter. And then I had a son, and I think I just like hadn't written any, like I wrote when she was pregnant, I wrote when she was born, and then I was like, oh, here's this guy, you know, what am I going to write about him? So I feel a little bit bad that this is like the first poem that I wrote for him, but I think he can handle it. He's tough. And it was about, there are certain things like you know a kid is going to learn, but like you don't want to be the one to teach them that, and which feels a little irresponsible, but also like, ugh. And it was, he found a toy gun, which like I didn't buy. I think my mom bought it for him. It seems like something he should do. And he didn't know what it was, because like he doesn't know what a gun is yet. You know, he's like 2 years old, and so he doesn't know what a gun is. He called it a hammer. And I just like couldn't like tell him. So I was like, yeah, it's a hammer. So that's what's going on here. And it's called A Gun Play. Different child, same kind of lie, by a different name. This time a gun, this time a gun. A child should always say what's true. This is my hammer, you say. Your sister, who knows better by now, looks at me. I will not disagree. I never said an ugly word, but smiled and stuck to play. With 5 years between you two to figure why I freeze and fail, disassemble this dissemblance, lay its parts out for inspection, and defer maintenance still I still can't say why I still can't say. I'll delegate to that other mother of the world, only too eager to nurture this way, to steal and chamber and open a child's garden of fire and begin to read aloud. Beyond the scope, escape, aim shaking in I am. Still, I won't spit that syllable from my own mouth today, won't make a better weapon of myself for now. Time was, the golden head irrevocably said. Today, the game is all the world's a bed of nails, and how propitious that we've found the perfect tool to pound them down. Or just a stronger child than me, for I am very small. You wriggle from my kisses trained on the soft target of your ear. Enough. There's work to do. This is my hammer. This is my hammer. I made a boat. I made a town. I searched the caverns up and down and named them one and all. My violent love, my 1+1, my hard-won son. What ungun words I give you now, for now, will wound just fine. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dora. That was a beautiful reading, and we're all really excited for your book coming in the fall. I'm sure. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Jalen. Jalen Eutsey is a writer from Miami, Florida, a recipient of the Wallace Stegner Fellowship from Stanford University. His poems have appeared in Best New Poets, the Yale Review, Poetry Northwest, and the Hopkins Review. His chapbook, Bubblegum Stadium, was published by Button Poetry. Just on a more personal note, we were lucky to have Jalen work at the library for a brief period in between his time at Hopkins and his Stegner Fellowship. So we're very excited to have him in the library today, again with us. Bubblegum Stadium takes us on a rich and colorful journey through the poet's experience as a Black boy in South Florida. Seen with a mix of clear-eyed honesty and compassion, and recounted in ravishing imagery and music, each detail yields beauty and insight. In the poem Summer, for instance, each subsequent view of a group of boys carries us deeper into understanding of the gorgeousness of Black boyhood and the ignorance of a society that fails to appreciate it. From the stark silhouette of, quote, some kids lit fireworks in the big tree in the big park, close quote, we move to a dreamier vision that uncovers the light inside the children, quote, painting the space between oak leaves and air with their rich luminescence. In House Guests, a lovely and non-judgmental dog presiding sleepily on high suggests a new moral order created not just by this home, but by the poems. Quote, above the staircase, the dog, smooth, sheeny, and brown, curls up like a waxing gibbous, with pointy ears sleeping. In West Perrine Park, the big park, the poet gently reveals what the white boy he helped could not see at the ballpark that day. Quote, the tightened black backs of the men who built the field he could now extend his dreams on. If the tension between the past and the present lends these poems richness, the continuity between past and present fills them with love. In one of my favorite moments, the poet's grandmother cracks a door and says magisterially, with an arresting rhythm, quote, we do not speak to the dead, it's against our beliefs. We do not trifle with ghosts, even ones we birthed. This book may not trifle with ghosts, but ghosts pass through it, and the result is irresistible. Poet Aracelis Girmay writes, exact, ruminative, skillful, Bubblegum Stadium is a gorgeous glimpse of Eutsey's exquisite singular sound. Please help me to welcome Jalen Eutsey and congratulate him on his new book.
Yeah, thank you. All right, hello. Wow, so many thank yous to go around, as Dora mentioned. I don't even know where to start. I applied to 10 MFA programs and only got into one. And anyone who knows anything about Hopkins will know that my very surreal sample was not usually what they're looking for. So I feel like I snuck in. And so all this is possible, I think, because of Dora's keen eye and, seeing in me and believing in my work before I did. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you to Dora again. So please give me a. And thank you to Shailene for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for being such a great colleague. I loved my time working here at the Pratt, and you were a big part of that. So thank you. What else? Thank you all for being here, for coming out to support. There's so many people in the crowd who've poured into me and my work. So Michael, Chris, just thanks so much for being here. This is awesome. All right, enough of that. Okay. Gonna the first book in the poem seems like a good place to start. First poem in the book. So this poem is titled West Perrine, Florida. So as Shailene mentioned, this book is primarily about Miami and West Perrine, this neighborhood that I grew up in. But I really honed my skills, I think, for writing about that place here in Baltimore. So it feels really special for this to be the launch of the book. West Perrine, Florida. Bare, bird-chested boys play touch football in the street. Reenact WrestleMania in the fenced-in front yard. When an errant pass rocks a mailbox, the whole block takes off running. After the game that never ends is paused, a swarm of sweaty boys meander to the corner store to buy a pickled egg, a hot sausage. At Galvez and B's Seafood, they call the woman working behind the counter mommy and order conch fritters with french fries, squeeze lemon juice over the conch, crisscrossing ketchup and mustard over the juice. Here, in this cutout between Hemingway's Key West home and Jenkins' moonlight, gunfire dapples the far-off night. One day, a man in a black Mercedes will inch up alongside and ask, "You working?" "Nah." "You want to work?" "Nah." The next one is titled House Guests. My mother has two house guests. Her house guests, two children, make a mess of the living room. Make a brimming biome of an oriental red, hand-tufted, wool, and littered with animals. Minuscule, plush, bean-filled, and breaking. The older child is a sweet, sensitive, clever little nightmare. She is afraid of the dark and worships her father. They talk on the phone for hours. She is bright and deceitful like an orchid mantis. The younger one puts her hand out, opening and closing it whenever she sees food. "Gimme," says the soft palm, the short fingers. "Gimme," says the panting dog, scratching at a dust brown bowl, hard plastic and empty. My mother has two house guests, not unlike plants or bees, never far from sunlight and honey. There is a drawer full of juice pouches. Below them, different bottles with different caps, a jar of Enfamil. Beneath the brown sectional and at my mother's feet, a small cardboard staircase, nearly weightless, made for a small dog with a history of knee problems. Above the staircase, the dog, smooth, sheeny, and brown, curls up like a waxen gibbous with pointy ears, sleeping. Yeah, Shailene did a good job because I'm definitely reading those poems. This one is Summer. Some kids lit fireworks in the big tree in the big park, hollowed out the trunk of a state treasure. Some kids, they say, started a mattress fire in the little park, charred the jungle gym. Three shirtless boys backflip on the narrow balance beam head of a cracked pink wall, painting the space between oak leaves and air with their rich luminescence. I'm still getting used to finding the poems because I just got the book myself, so. All right, this one is titled To My Caring and Worried Mother. To my caring and worried mother. There are sliced carrots in the shape of a cowbell because I understand great food should sing to you. There's a novel about Alzheimer's and some magic memory pills for grandma. There's an automatic food dispenser so you don't have to feed the dogs anymore. There's a travel bag with a Bible and a plane ticket to Paris. There's a color-coded flowchart describing the best way to carry a conversation with grandma. In the bottom right-hand corner, in fine print, it explains you may have to adopt new tactics on the fly. I caught grandma watching the Hulk in Spanish today. I just flipped to the English version. To my caring and worried mother, raising your voice won't help. There is no cure. All the post-it notes on all the cabinets should say, open with caution, eat with intensity, remember, we love you and will help you find the watch you stuffed in the cookie jar. This one is a sonnet, and that's the title, Sonnet, and it's for Biker Boy Will. How could America ever love you? She misunderstands your fresh pressed white tee, the gaudy ticking gold on your left wrist, the swim trunks and fitted, the retro J's gracing the grimy pink-red outside courts. She don't know what to do with all your swagger and braggadocious bluster, the gum-flapping wolf pronounced wolf tickets. You said the losing team's son ain't gonna eat tonight. You said the game was for 5 racks. You could lie your ass off. You said this shit is really, really hard. But of course, there is a mother's protection. My old girl kept me in the house, and I thank her for that. I did a class visit recently, and this was one of the poems mentioned, so I think I'll read that. So it's titled Snuff, which is the term for smokeless tobacco. My dad used chewing tobacco when I was a kid and throughout my life. Snuff. My daddy packed a pinch of Skull Mint, sexier than most things I've seen women do. Once he offered me and my adolescent tongue a taste out of some old school parochial sense of education. Let the rod of experience thunder loud and profound where the lips might only whisper unintentional invitations. Like the clued in June bug I heard alarm bells blaring behind my eyes, blind with admiration. I decided simply to watch and marvel at the way my daddy carried himself with so much swagger, the way he kept a Diet Pepsi bottle in his back pocket stuffed with paper towels and dip spit, as cool as the coldest mink on the coat rack. I settled for a different red and black map of imitation, a can of Jack Link's beef chew, fattened my lip with the finely ground meat and juice, slipped the faux snuff into the back pocket of my baseball pants with scandalous intent as if it was the plastic foil O of a condom wrapper. Leaning into my little secret, the lead up to my big joke, my wry smile and reveal. My daddy's vice as beautiful as a well-made blade, the astringent mint making Jean's nicotine sing, setting the gums ablaze. He quit and unquit, and I learned what you can and can't make of a man. But one day on the red clay of Black Miami, where the diamonds go mostly unused, I got bit by a wasp while fielding ground balls. My father took the wet contents of his bottom lip and pressed it to the bite, stemming the pain and swelling. I got to return to one of baseball's cherished rhythmic routines: catch, step, and pitch it to first. How am I doing on time? All right, I think I'll read two more. So, surprise visit and then West Perrine Park. Surprise visit. Mangoes ripening in a wicker basket, tough and green. You could skin them and eat them with salt. In the oven, the softening flesh of salmon waiting to be pulled out and served with yellow grits and butter. My mother was away when two visitors came knocking. What I can describe is the powder blue chalk outlined hopscotch box, beginning with your first step off the fading beige front porch so that you could jump or drop into play the way you might slip into a riff of your granddaddy's country twang and wisdom. What I can describe is the flaking floral porch column and brown coir welcome mat, rough to the touch of bare feet, or, if by some cruelty, the sensitive skin of the cheek. My cousin lived in the fenced in house across the street before he slept on our couch. His mother lived next door in a seaweed green duplex with a small backyard and a metal line used to air dry damp clothes. She was alive when the visitors came, or she wasn't. All I have is one good shoulder, two good feet, and memory. The elementary school field trip where I eased out to the bathroom, then quenched my thirst at the water cooler, while the other kids cheesed and marveled at the fingerprinting process. I think they used black ink, black like these visitors' uniforms. I tell these men the man they seek never lived here, has left no valuables or products, no secrets but the mystery of his brief life. When they demanded a more senior presence, my grandmother cracked the door a little wider and spoke with the detachment of a disembodied voice. We do not speak to the dead. It's against our beliefs. We do not trifle with ghosts, even ones we birth. All right. The last one for now is West Perrine Park, the big park. And it has an epigraph by the sports writer Howard Bryant. And a little bit of backstory, my dad played on a semi-pro baseball team in the neighborhood that was started all the way back in the 1960s. And this field I later played on, playing club baseball in college. West Perrine Park, the big park, and the epigraph reads, "It gave these black men their poetry." A white boy asked me to walk him to the bathroom before a baseball game at a public park where my father was once pseudonymed Myth. He ate the snake and a generation of hellcats, Pee-wee, Crow, Romy, Termite, and others, had been good for pockets and bad for business as fans won ends on the weekend, betting and rooting for the home team. Everyone in their Easter Sunday, straight from the pew, alabaster best, or home whites, swaying behind home plate and sprinkled down the right field line like seafoam teasing the shore, then decided to opt out of the grinding march of money-making come Monday. What the boys seemed too afraid to understand was that all the men crowding around the teal, worn metal bleachers behind the dugout were arguing about the Dolphins, or playing the dozens, or sipping grape soda, or rolling bones, or narrating the sweat ballet unfurling atop the two-tone green and pink-red basketball court. And all those men would soon be rooting for him because he was wearing orange and green. What was unseen were the tightened black backs of the men who built the field he could now extend his dreams on. I think he homered that day, rounding the bases with a surprised smile as the Hellcats of old tapered a fade or faded from memory. He always played better on this hallowed ground he couldn't divorce from phantom echoes of bullets and blood. I walked the boy across the second, unused court to the bathroom, our metal cleats tapping a tune of pregame buzz and jitters while a mother weaved box braids into her daughter's hair down the left field line, and the memories of a milkman with no milk hung like fog in the air around the backstop. Bubblegum Stadium, they called it.
Okay, thank you, Jalen. So good. So good. So at this point in the program, we have time for a little Q&A. So if anyone has a question or a comment for Jalen or Dora or both, please raise your hand. um, do you want to call on people or I mean,
don't know. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think sound is probably, I'm coming up with this answer now, but I think sound is probably instrumental in it, sound and rhythm. You know, my Hopkins education introduced me to, like an iambic beat and meter. And, I feel like in Hopkins, I feel like people were like, oh, yeah, you're learning about rhyme. I'm like, Lil Wayne taught me how to rhyme. Like, I didn't need Hopkins for that, but I definitely benefited greatly from the education in meter and rhythm. And so I think combining those kind of like instincts and that interest in sound, I think helps and helps like hone it for the page specifically. So I think that's my best answer. I don't know. Do you have an answer? The book sounds in many ways very elegiac. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to elegy or elegy adjacent writing? Yeah, I mean, I've heard people very kindly say that the book is sort of like nostalgia, but like without a kind of like hunger for things past that we don't really want, which is very prevalent today. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think honestly, it was just a West Perrine was a place that was very grounding for me. I grew up a Jehovah's Witness. I'm kind of naturally pretty shy. I generally feel like I'm on the periphery of things, and so, um, and sometimes I think it takes a while for like the weight of things to hit me. So I think all of those things mean that I'm sort of writing from the periphery, looking at the thing. And I think in this case, I was writing about it once I had moved away, and I haven't really like explored this very much. Like I mentioned, Biker Boy Will. I shot a documentary. Like I just went to this park for 6 weeks and took footage, and I did some interviews with my dad's former teammates and people who had played before he was on the team. And I haven't like gone back so to check in, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've really thought about it that way, but I guess there's also the book is also very much about my grandmother, so there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Um,
Hey Dylan and Dora, thank you so much for the great reading. I was wondering, knowing that you mentor and mentee in the Hopkins program, what did you both learn from each other? Like, what's like one of the most important things you learned from each other, whether it's poetry or life as a poet or just life as a person? You gotta go first.
Oh, I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, so is this on? This is good? Okay. So I mean, I have to say, like, I probably sounded like I laid it on really thick about Jalen, but I honestly did not lay it on thick enough. Like, I went to, I was like, what if I read like something from his letter of recommendation? And then I was like, no, I was like, he will like fall into the ground because it's so. But like one of the things that I think, well, no, it's more than one. So one of the things that when I looked back at like this recommendation, which I like, brush off every couple years and like make sure, says all the new great things that Jalen's done, is I have this moment where I just like get very personal and I just talk about like how kind he was, and is obviously still, but like one of the things, and you're like this too, Alejandro, will say, as a student in the program, I think it's completely understandable that students don't like ask how their professors are doing. I mean, it's a little bit of like when you see your second grade teacher at the grocery store and you're like, oh my gosh, this person has a life outside of school, like it blows your mind because like they're your professors. You don't, it's not your job to like care about them in a human way. And Jalen, without ever being like, oh, trying to get something or do, it was just always like caring in this way. Like he was so rooted. He'd be like, how is your how is that, just always like take just a second to be, which would sometimes be a little bit scary because he'd be like, how's your writing going? I'd be like, get off my back. No, I wouldn't say it. It's but in a good, he just, and I think it was just a combination of like, how he was raised and also just like personal kind of who he is. And so that to me, like to see, okay, like the workplace and the classroom can be a space of like and should be of like human care without that being any kind of like weird blurring of boundaries, I feel like was very much something where I was like, wow, this is, and he came very young. I mean, you came right out of college, right? Um, and the other thing that I saw, and I think maybe this is just like growing, I mean, playing baseball is like he put in the work. And not every student does that. Not every professor does that. Not every person does that. But like to see, I mean, he was like, you know, would borrow books. He would like go just above and beyond. I mean, he saw what he was doing there as work, which didn't make it not joyful, but it was very, very impressive. And so to see what he put into that, I think like subtly raised the bar for his classmates, and certainly was just very rewarding for me, but also was something that I think was like a good reminder in terms of like a what would Jalen do? He would put in the work. So I don't know if that's, I mean, obviously there's plenty that I learned like on the page from him, but those are the things that like pop into my head right away.
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing answer. Just very quickly, I want to go back to the question because it was like rattling in my head. I think some of the poems specifically about my grandma were kind of written out of a place of like trying to get to know a person who I lived with all the time. We watched TV together, but who in many ways I didn't really know. You know, she was also like sort of private and shy, and you know, she lived a full life really by the time I'm sort of coming to consciousness about her own life really. And so I think those poems are kind of like searching for things I don't know, and you know, maybe like playing up things that I do know, and kind of like highlighting the ways in which she was kind of a character beyond just like, you know, her connection to me as grandma who's like cooking and doing all the things. So yeah. And to your question, Alejandro, I mean, every time I read Dora, so both Dora and my undergrad advisor are just amazing writers and have this ability, like massive vocabularies, just virtuosic on the page. And like, so listening to Dora now, I'm like, man, now I want to like go home and write. And like, yeah, there's that way in which there's so much inspiration every time I hear Dora's work. I wrote a review for Flourish of the for Be More Art, and the book, you if you saw the book, it just had all these notes about all the things that were happening craft wise on the page that I was jazzed about. So I want to say I learned from that, but I feel like I don't know if I've got the chops to do that exactly on the page, but I'm constantly aware of it and trying to learn from it. But I think more towards the point, and in line with what Dora said, I think just being like a mentor, and a steward for the work and for like people's humanity. I remember every time I met with Dora one on one, and she was looking at a poem, she would say like, you can either go in this like more surreal, associative direction, or you can kind of like go in a more clarity and linear narrative direction. But she always gave me the opportunity, and she always like first paid attention to what was happening on the page rather than just saying like, do this, make the poem into a style that I understand or I appreciate. And so I think I've taken that with me, and that's the approach I use when I teach. Because you know, first and foremost, I have to figure out like what is the orchestration on the page, and how does my feedback first feed into that before I suggest changing something into like a different style. So I'm really grateful for that, and I think also like I'm sort of anxious, and you know, in an MFA program every other week you're like, what am I doing here, like what is the point of this? And you know, I think she was just incredibly kind at like listening to that and like offering solutions and options. And yeah, so yeah.
I'm going to say one more thing about Jalen's poems because I talked about Jalen as a person. The poems, what I love, I always love it when like people know when not to listen to me. And like Jalen's saying, I will say, I try not to be super prescriptive. I try not to be in the classroom, do this, do that. But you still have things where like you catch yourself, pushing somebody a little bit toward like, well, why don't you try this one? And one of the things I like an ending that like is like firework, you know, Disney style, like just, I mean, like I'm just a sucker for like that big ending. And Jalen, there were times when I was like, well, what if you kept go? What if you did that? What if you did that? And I was never like, you have to do, but his willingness to have like a quiet ending that like just like when you think about like, okay, so in his poem where with the house guests, where there's like the little dog curled up. Like it doesn't go back to the kid. It just like stops with that little dog that just like walks up those little stairs and like curls up, and like that's that. Or even like Bubblegum Stadium, they called it, and like that's where the poem ends. You know, it doesn't go back to the boy at the beginning, doesn't, and so that to me is, I think, something that takes like a real quiet confidence that like you're doing what you mean to be doing, and I think can like be incredibly powerful in a poem. But you can, you know, so I think like that to me is something where like I feel like I learned from that, and I'm really glad that that nobody, including me, ever pushed you away from that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Back. Thank you. Yeah, let's connect.
Um, any other thoughts? Cleve, do we have any online remarks? Okay. Well, that was a lovely, just some wonderful remarks about craft and being a kind person. So thank you for that. No, I feel inspired by that. So thank you. So I think Dora and Jalen are going to give us some closing poems, and before we finish up. So thank you.
Okay, so I will read one more poem. Let me see if I can find the one I want to read. 1 second. So this next book, Trying Times Trying, which is coming out. I'm going to try to pull up this one here. Sorry. Sorry. This is, I should not be trying to do this on my, okay. Okay. So we were talking, Jalen visited my class yesterday, and we're talking about like having readers or not having readers. And I know like you're really supposed to have people who like read your you know, and give you hard feedback. But I think like, I mean, Jalen and I, we're hard on ourselves. Like it's okay, you know, it's fine. And so this is a poem that maybe is a little bit about like why you don't always ask people like what they think of your poems. The title is "For My Friend Who Is Tired of Children in Poems." And so this was, you know, in writing this book that's coming out in the fall, there are a lot of these poems about kids. And so, you know, I kind of wrote, like, understandable, fair, you know, you could get tired of anything in poems, but this was sort of a response to that. For my friend who is tired of children in poems. I also tire of children in poems and of children off the page as well. I turn from a line's easy awe to endless demands, sticky hands at my hem. My teacher wrote Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, then dripped honey on top. Let the pupils lick the letters. The line's low buzz metabolizes slowly in the body. Friend, no one is looking. Bend your head and taste. Can I call you baby? Can I call you honey? Only here, on a page white as any side of a cube of refined sugar. These are just words. Blame me, but it's in my blood to love this way. I make a study of it. What luxury. Together, let's be sick of the sweetness of this world. Thank you.
This is perfect. We're in lockstep here because the poem I'm going to read was a poem I wrote during the Stegner Fellowship after sort of much frustration about people not understanding my poems and people being like, just tell us exactly what's happening. And so I kind of got pissed off and I was like, okay, fine, I'll just tell you everything. And so that's what this poem is in my estimation. So the title is Unsent Letter to My Little Cousin. It's a prose poem. It's a little long, so bear with me. Unsent Letter to My Little Cousin. Remember when I jacked you up for getting slick with grandma? I'm sorry. Her brain was dimming and graying like fat on steak. By then, even the advantage of a quip was too much for me to take. I was grieving a long list of losses, those past and those waiting in the futureless distance. I was grieving a blooming grave of language. This was long after I was the dreaming boy afloat on the untroubled waters of my dreams. I never heard the screams. Your uncle stabbed on the front porch, and my mother on her hands and knees scrubbing blood and history from the faded beige tiles. The same porch where you could find grandma arched over her aloe vera every morning. What to make of the dreaming boy, of his faithfulness to escape? I chased you in circles over the overgrown grass of the backyard after you raised the rim as I was dunking. I could have chipped a tooth or been concussed, but wasn't. An only child, I never learned to laugh at myself. Once, in college, I left a stranger's bed to drive you to school. In the moist dark, it was hard to explain. Who sings this, you asked? The Weekend? Let's keep it that way. You teach me about the lightness of light. You're a father now. Down deep, was this the plan all along? Is this the only way our people are classic, canonical? Maybe you've got fatherhood licked. You, the seedling, heading for the heavens with 4 other seedlings flooding in and out of a small house. Grandma had 9 brothers and sisters. She called toddler you Chucky for the dusty morning hue of your hair. You, the additional black rugrat left on the cutting room floor. You weren't yet born when I fell head first into a glass on the carpeted ground, when doctors and all the loved ones in the room learned in unison my spirit was impervious to anesthesia. They had to use a straitjacket to keep me still, to steady my head for the physician's needle and thread. Grandma must have been a light sleeper. When your uncle called out in the middle of the night, she was first to greet him in the flooding grooves between tiles. I suspect you too know the splashing call of the dream, the way the waves turn chains to air. I should have stopped in Dallas to visit last summer. What was I afraid of? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Jalen and Dora for the really beautiful poetry reading. I just want to remind everybody that we're selling copies of their books at the table outside this room. Please buy a copy or 2 and take them home with you. And I'm sure Jalen and Dora will be happy to sign the books. I want to thank also the Gateway Agency for providing accessibility for this event today. Thank you. Thank you also to Snug Books for supporting us, and thank you to all of you for taking time to join us. Please sign up on our poetry events email list in the back as you leave so that we can keep in touch with you about other wonderful poetry events. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.